Good evening, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Lotus City Council. It's April 12th, 2018, and we're underway at 7 p.m. Hope you enjoyed the music as you're waiting for the meeting to start. That is our Lotus Area Community Band, and that's the spring concert from last year. They have a concert coming up April 15th. That's this Sunday, John Marshall High School at 3 p.m. This is very unique to Bexar County. We're the only suburban city out of 27 that have their own community band. So we're very pleased, and you're all welcome to come to the concert. It's going to be a great concert. As we get started on our agenda, first I'd like to welcome Cub Scouts that are here. We have, 7 or 8? And they're from Pack 14, Lotus Pack 14. They meet at Los Reyes Elementary School. And their assistant Cub Master is Joaquin Fernandez. Joaquin, you want to stand up? And guys, you guys stand up too. And they're working on building a better world. And so we want to welcome you to our council meeting. I understand this is the first step in achieving this goal. And building a better world is a big goal. So, hey, if we're step one, that's great. But you're welcome to stay the whole meeting. We hope you do. At the end, all of us are available for questions. And so just keep that in mind. But anyway, welcome. We're glad to have you. Thank you. Okay, we'll open up the agenda with the invocation. Tonight, Councilmember Villanueva is assigned that task, and then we will have the pledges to the United States and Texas flag. So if you would please stand for the invocation and pledges.
Heavenly Father, we ask you for your divine grace and guidance for all in attendance at tonight's meeting. Let us pray for all first responders and our military personnel around the world in these uncertain times. Keep them safe and allow them to come home as they accomplish their daily missions. For residents of Lotus, may they enjoy peace and good health all the days of their lives. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, next up is our consent agenda, and for those of you who are here to learn, citizens be heard. You're right. I'm jumping the gun. We do have a citizen to be heard. It's Garrett Brandt. Please state your name and address, and we have a microphone. Make sure that's on. And your time will start after you say your name and address.
My name is Garrett Brandt. I'm at 10543 Rockingham Trail, right over there in Lotus Park Estates. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you. I'm here to complain of the service of C6 Disposal Company, which I believe has an exclusive license with the city of San Antonio. And I must tell you, in the 18 months I've lived here, I've never had a good experience with them. And I would encourage you all to not renew their contract whenever it comes up, or at least put it out for competitive bid or allow others to come in. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but let's just say every single time I've called customer service on billing matters, most recently I'm here because of a broken trash can. Whenever I've called and left a message, they have never, and I repeat, never called me back. I've had to call them sometimes 2 and 3 times until I get a live person, and I find that abominable. Most recently on Monday, their trash pickup people damaged our trash can to the point that the wheels literally fell off. Did they take it with them? No, they left it right there on the curb for us to drag back. I can show you a picture if you'd like. So my wife called, left a message. No delivery of a new trash can this week. Thursday came, yesterday, or this morning came. I put the trash out. I put the wheels up on their side, showing the can was defective. They emptied the can and left me a defective can right there. So I called, and the guy on the phone said he had no record of my wife calling on Monday. The earliest he can give me a replacement can is Wednesday. Now, I know trash service isn't exactly the end of the world, but it is important that we have a good system to have this. It's frustrating when you call a company that you all have an exclusive contract with and they don't do their job. Do you know that they will not email you? You have to have an email to sign up for the online payments, but if your card, like mine was, where I had to replace it and I forget which accounts is automatically drawn on, they don't email you saying, hey, your payment didn't go through. No, they wait 30 days. And they don't even mail you a notice. What they do is they taped a notice to my trash can that happened to also have the brush pickup. So my wife got it and put the brush pickup side on. I didn't even know I'd missed a payment until I got another letter 30 days later saying they're going to cut off my service. And when I called them and I said, well, I have email, they go, oh, well, we don't email. Are we living in the 21st century or what? So I'm just going to encourage you, please either have higher customer service standards in this contract or allow us to choose a company that is going to respond to my concerns. I had to call them at least 5 times in the last 18 months over various things, and I am just fed up with them. So I'm here to complain and ask you to please hold them to a higher standard and let's get somebody in here who will take our concerns seriously. And that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Garrett. If you would, please leave Selena your phone number.
Yes.
And I would like to have George Cantu give you a call.
Very good.
Now we're going to do the consent agenda. And as I said, for those of you who aren't familiar with the way one of our meetings runs, or this type of a meeting, consent agenda is just a grouping of agenda items that I, along with the staff, consider to be fairly routine city business, so they're all lumped together. The intent is hopefully to get one motion and one second and vote to approve them all. However, if a council member has a question on one of these items, they can ask that question. If it can be answered briefly, we'll answer the question. Otherwise, we'll just pull the item, or they can request to pull the item to move it to the full discussion with the individual items. So that's basically what the consent agenda is. Tonight, there are only 2 items on it, agendas 3 and 4. One, approval of the minutes of the last meeting, and the other, the approval of the revenue and expense report, along with balance sheets and encumbrance reports. And that's dated April 6th. So I would ask at this time, are there any questions on either of these items or a request to pull either one? No questions, no request. Then I would look for a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 3 and 4.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve consent agenda items 3 and 4 as presented.
I have a motion from Fredericks. Do I have a second?
Second.
You seconded?
I did.
You did?
Sorry. Yes, sir.
We have a motion from Fredericks, a second from Villanueva. So no discussion being required. We'll call the question. All in favor of approving consent agenda items 3 and 4, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Consent agenda items 3 and 4 are approved. That takes us to item number 5. This is discussion of and action on an ordinance approving an encroachment license agreement for a wayfinding or parking sign to be constructed on municipal right-of-way for the shops in Old Town Lotus. So I would look for a motion and a second, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we discuss and take action on item number 5 as written.
Motion from Massey. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Buys. Cynthia, you're up.
Yeah, I'm looking at the picture that was given to us. I'm trying to figure out, the new sign to me looks much better than the original, so I'm happy with the sign. I'm just trying to figure out where exactly it's gonna be located in this picture that they gave us. There's the 2 big signs that have all the different businesses. Is it gonna be next to it?
It's going to be where those 2 temporary signs have been, between that pump house and the existing wayfinding sign, is what I was told. Rick can address it if it's different than that.
Because I'm confused about where
So
exactly.
in the picture, you've got the 2 directional or wayfinding signs that are already there, and it would be placed at least as proposed. Now, this council can change this if they want. It would be placed behind the two signs that are there. So you would have three signs basically parallel, perpendicular to the curb.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. I don't have any, I just wanted to find that. As far as giving them a right-of-way, is that the city right-of-way then? I didn't realize it went that far up.
I didn't either, but we looked at it and it goes all the way back pretty much to that wall.
Really?
Yeah, actually, the wall is on city right-of-way as well.
That's right, we
Yeah.
gave them.
Yeah, I remember
Okay.
that, yeah.
So I'm gonna say I don't have a problem with giving them the right-of-way.
Okay, Bert?
Yes, Rick, I'm gonna address you on, you said it's behind the signs? Or next to them? Am I looking at the right picture? I'm sorry, I didn't see which one.
The only.
Is that it?
Yes, so you've got the two existing wayfinding signs that are perpendicular to the curb. And the only area that it can go in is creating a third perpendicular sign behind those two existing signs.
When you say behind, you mean next to it, don't you?
No, if it was next to it, then you wouldn't be able to see the wayfinding signs that are there.
When you're saying behind, you're meaning in the same line?
Yes.
But closer to this pump house, so there'll be these two and then this parking sign.
Right there.
Okay, thanks. All right, and then I had one more question. Thank you for showing me. There's no utilities or anything we need to worry about, is there, in that area?
They'll be responsible for calling dig tests before they dig in that area. But to my knowledge, there's a gray force line I know for sure, but I don't know exactly where it is.
Okay, that's all I had.
And there's a water main going, that's what this little house is for, so when Dempsey built it, that water main is in there, or the fire line one, but like Rick says, we require them to call the 811 to get the locates.
Okay. Oh, and I like the way the sign looks also. That's all I had.
Ed?
I'm in favor of the sign. I think the placement will look just right. I like the aluminum aspect of the sign itself, the wood grain. So I'm for it.
Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the look of the sign. I think it may be the right placement. However, it seems to me that it's going to be big enough to dwarf the others. And I didn't know it needed to be quite so large, because it's almost going to be the size of the other signs that have multiple names on them. And to me, it just seems like we're dedicating a whole lot, and if other businesses move in, then we're going to be requesting yet another sign, because those two signs don't seem to have much more space available. And I know it's not advertising a business. I'm just concerned that we're going to end up with a fourth sign or a fifth sign down the road there as other things move into that area. And allowing this sign to be comparatively as big, I know it's not a billboard or anything, but you know, it's 4 feet tall and almost 4 feet wide. And when you compare it to those others, it's going to be almost the same size as the others. And I didn't know that you would need something that big just to have parking with an arrow. When all of these other businesses are allowed just a small section for wayfinding, it seems like almost the parking is more important than all the businesses based on the size of the sign. I'm okay with it. I just think we're going to be looking down the road at other sign requests, and then we're not going to have any space unless we then have to come back and tell these people to take it down or start adding other things to that sign. Thank you.
The 48 inches is from the ground to the top of the sign, right?
Yes, sir.
So the actual sign is about probably 24 by,
No, I know, but it's
44.
taking up
yeah,
the
yeah.
space comparable to the post signs of the others.
Do you have any proposal for changing the size, or?
A little late at this point, given that planning and zoning has already approved the look of the sign, and the only reason it's coming to us is whether we are or aren't going to be granting the easement. I don't see a problem with the sign. Like I said, I just see a problem down the road, and then we're going to be in that position of, after the fact, trying to figure out how to do it. My original preference would have been to have something added to the existing signs down there that says additional parking and pointing, but that's not what's before us. That would have been my preference, but.
May I?
Yeah.
Those existing signs that are there, remember, those are city That's
Right.
city signage, and so our Public Works Department creates those signs and replaces them as needed and as requested. So I just wanted to clarify that if you're not aware that the city is putting the stuff on those signs, we are, and we're maintaining them, so.
I get that, and what I'm saying is, the concern of the property owner is that people don't know that there's parking there. And so putting up a sign of the size of these others, I think it's just a little overkill, that's just my opinion. And I don't see the necessity to have that large of a sign, despite the fact that it obviously is gonna tell people there's parking back there, but, I think down the road it's gonna cause us problem, as I've said.
Well, keep in mind, planning and zoning is an advisory committee and recommends that, but you guys have the final say. So if there's something that you want to propose as a change, now's the time to do it.
I'd like to hear some more comments
Okay,
before
Paul?
thinking of a proposal.
I spent some time up in there, this weekend on Saturday for market days and was walking around in there, and I know that there's parking back there, but I did kind of notice when I was pulling up that if you didn't know that there was parking back there, I mean, I think that wayfinding sign is probably necessary to get people back into the back where there's much more parking. I hadn't thought about the size, but I'm in favor of the sign. But I'll entertain a change if Councilmember Blue wishes.
That it? Cynthia, want follow-up?
Yeah, I do. Now that you mention it, Alex brought up a good point. This new development that we approved
Same driveway.
is going to be going, that's their entrance, isn't that correct?
Correct.
And it's called Hacienda del Sol, or something, is it along?
Correct.
They're gonna want a sign somewhere there. Now, can there be a sign on the other side of this street? I mean, on the other side of that driveway? Why does that, in fact, why does that parking, why does it have to be where there? Can it be a little bit smaller and put this way so that people coming into, coming from Old Town? Most of the people are coming, see that, I don't understand why it's facing an area where most people aren't coming from. Most people are coming through Old Town to that area. So is there a way to put that sign on the other side and make it a little bit smaller so that, I mean, I'm just, because I am, the Hacienda sign is gonna go there, and now where is that gonna go? Is that gonna go on the other side?
I'm assuming it is a two-sided sign. I didn't really, yeah, it's a two-sided sign.
Okay, it is.
It's pretty obvious from the stuff on the wall that is the shops at Old Town Lotus, so you could strike that off and just put parking with the arrow, is just a thought. Anything else?
Yeah, I think that Alex has a good point about another sign, and it's gonna be another big sign up there somewhere.
Bert, any follow-up?
Yeah, what is the real size of the sign? Because if you look at where it says size, it's 24 by 36. But if you look at the picture, it says 44. So,
That's because you're including 8 inches of wood.
Yeah.
Those are 4x4
oh,
posts.
okay.
They always include the frame.
I don't have a problem with the size of the sign.
Ed, anything else?
No, sir.
Alex?
I don't have I wasn't prepared to make a specific recommendation for it, and I don't really want to necessarily, I don't know if the person is here to answer questions about it at all or not.
No.
I don't think so. I just, one of the things I worry about a lot of things is the end up of cluttering, and I think that a sign whose sole purpose is to say parking, that's as big as the other signs, is a bit too big. My thought would be that it would be narrower or shorter, or probably narrower, because we are going to be getting requests for additional business signs in there. And I don't know, it says 44 inches. I know it's 36 sign face part, but that's a pretty good size parking, word. I think you can see that from quite some distance. And the wayfinding signs in Old Town Lotus are designed really, according to our ordinance, to be wayfinding for pedestrian. if I'm not mistaken. That's the way our ordinance is worded. And this doesn't seem like it is designed for that. I don't know, I would think that if the wording were just say additional parking and make it maybe half as wide, I don't know about the height part, because you still want to be able to see it. But I'm not saying that I want to deny this request. I was just bringing a concern for down the road as well.
Paul?
I don't have any additional comments.
Okay, keep in mind that if you would like to think about it and make some recommendations, you could always, I don't think it's time critical, maybe postpone it and have them come back with an alternate design for next meeting. That's an option also that you guys can make, and that would be your decision
Yeah,
to
can I make
postpone.
a comment? I mean, if we approve this sign as this, I mean, then it's grandfathered in. We can't make them take it down and all of that kind of stuff later. So I think it might behoove us to kind of step back a little and think about, you know, other signs that are gonna be going up there. And I agree that, I think when you're driving, it's probably not that big a sign when you're driving through there, but on the other hand, it is a pretty big sign for, and to say shops at Old Town Lotus parking. Obviously, that's where they are.
Yeah, and everything else says shops at Helotes.
Yeah, so to just say parking would be sufficient, and so that you don't need a big sign to say that, just, you know, same kind of color, you know, wood, whatever, but just more compact.
Would you then consider amending your motion to postpone till our next meeting with the direction to the staff to work with Philip to come up with maybe a smaller
Yes, I would like to do
design
that.
idea?
Yeah, I would.
So you'd like to amend your motion to postpone
Yes.
till our next meeting? Bert, will you second that?
I still don't see a problem with the sign, but if that's what it sounds like that's what the consensus is, all right, I'll second it.
We'll find out, because there'll be a vote on the postponement, and if
Okay.
it fails, then you'll
Okay.
take action on this.
I'll second it.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay. Any comments on the postponement amendment? Okay, then we'll vote on that amendment to postpone this particular item until our next meeting, which will be the, what is that, the 26th? With the direction to the staff to work with Philip and see if he can come up with a smaller design
can I
to
ask a
accomplish the
question?
same thing.
Can I ask a question? Is it gonna have to go back to P and Z?
Shouldn't, no, because they've already recommended it.
No? Okay.
Okay? So, no discussion being requested, then we'll call the question. All in favor of postponing this item until our meeting on April 26th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
We have 3 ayes, 2 noes. So we will bring this back at our next meeting. Okay, next up, we have a presentation by Armstrong, Vaughn and Associates, our auditors, on the audit report for fiscal year ending 2017. And Kim, appreciate you coming.
Hello.
And understand you have a PowerPoint.
Yeah, I thought I would try something new this year. So
Okay,
I made
well,
a PowerPoint.
PowerPoints are always exciting.
Right.
And we do have Cub Scouts here who I'm sure
I was going
will
to say, I didn't know I was going to get critiqued.
enjoy the PowerPoint. And you will be graded. They'll each have a little card, give you a 1 through 10.
Right.
But anyway, it's all yours.
All right. And certainly I'm happy to entertain any other detailed questions from the report, but I just thought this might help condense a whole lot of information onto just a couple of slides rather than a lot of page turning. So hopefully this is a nice change for the future. First and foremost, I did want to tell you all that we always appreciate the opportunity to work with the city. The staff were wonderful and always are able to get us our information that we need and in a timely manner, so we greatly appreciate that. The first slide that you have there in front of you is I wanted to just kind of go over just a summary of the things that we're required to communicate to you. For the most part, this is a pretty standard letter, but it's just certain things that we want to be sure to call to your attention. The first thing is any significant estimates that might be underlying the city's financial statements. And the reason why that's important is because certainly estimates cannot be pinned down to an exact figure. They're estimates for just that reason. And therefore, our responsibility as the auditor is to determine what that underlying rationale for those estimates are to see if it's something that the financials could be manipulated if those estimates weren't reasonable. So the estimates that you have in your financials are the lives of your depreciable assets, the collectability of your EMS receivable, and your net pension liability. And that last one in particular might be the easiest one to cause manipulation from the surface, except that it's not a number that the city is actually determining. Those numbers all come from the Texas Municipal Retirement System, and the city is simply responsible for recording that information. So overall, we felt that all the underlying rationale and the reasonings for those estimates were considered reasonable. The next thing we're required to communicate to you is any significant disclosures, and again, related to that retirement system, because it has so many actuarial assumptions involved in it. That's why we usually name that as being a significant disclosure. We're always challenged to try to find some recommendation for improvement, simply because the city does have very good internal controls, but we're always wanting to be able to find ways that we can offer opportunities for the city to improve upon. We did have a couple this year, and we've discussed those with management in detail, and they've actually already worked very thoroughly to implement some changes to that, to just try to be able to help the city move a little smoother and hopefully be able to have a little bit better efficiency and everything. And then lastly on this slide, I just wanted to call your attention to the fact that the city did comply with the Public Funds Investment Act. Any questions on any of that?
We complied with what?
Sorry, the Public Funds Investment Act.
Okay.
Are we asking questions?
Sure.
Sure, please.
Kim, on the significant matters, findings, or issues, you did find two things. One was about the credit card receivables balance.
Yes, sir.
It was incorrectly reconciled. What do you mean by that? I'm sorry.
So basically, when the bank reconciliations were being done, there's a timing delay, of course, when it comes to the credit cards. And so there was a number that basically wasn't being reconciled, and so it caused the financials on the balance sheet to be misstated. And it was a fairly large number, but it was fairly easy to reconcile. And that was actually something the city did provide to us as the auditors. We did not correct it ourselves.
Okay. And then under number two, this is just, I guess, maybe a question for Rick. You said you should consider modifying the existing purchasing policy to $3,000. I thought we did that already.
We did recently after we had
Oh,
the
okay.
conversation with the auditors.
Oh, okay, so that was, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. I thought we had done that, but I wasn't sure.
Certainly, yeah. And that's why I say some of these recommendations have certainly already been put into place, including the reconciling. There's new procedures on that to make sure that that's reconciled timely and won't cause any kind of future misstatements.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you, Kim.
Certainly. All right, moving on to some of the selected financial data. So you may recall that the financials are actually presented in two types of presentations. The first presentation is the government-wide, and this is the one that looks at the entire city at a glance. So it's got all your funds together, and it also adds in all of your long-term assets as well as all of your long-term debt. So looking at that second slide there, or I guess second slide after the title slide. So on your government-wide statements, you had total assets of just over $16.5 million. Now, certainly the majority of that, in fact, about 58% of that number is embedded in your capital assets. So that's your building, your infrastructure, your equipment, those types of things. So certainly not necessarily liquid dollars, but that's what you would expect from the government-wide when it takes in all those assets that the city is invested in. Obviously, the remaining difference would be made up of your cash and some of those short-term receivables, such as like your sales tax receivable that comes in shortly after year-end. Moving on down, you'll see that you did have total liabilities of $13.7 million. Now, as I mentioned, this adds in all of your long-term debt. So this is all your long-term payments on your bonds, on your compensated absences, any future vacation payouts that might be paid to employees. It also includes your net pension liability that I just mentioned that we have to take from TMRS and enter that number. And as well as also includes your settlement payable, all those future payments out on that settlement. So that would include all of your long-term liabilities. And after all that, you do have a total positive net position of $3.3 million. Now, because there are some restrictions within that net position, then unfortunately you do have an unrestricted net position of $1.3 million. The good thing, though, is that hopefully this will continue to increase, and that deficit will slowly go back to zero and then become positive over time. Any questions on any of that?
Question? Okay.
Okay. Moving,
I do have a comment. To address that unrestricted net position, that does, the primary reason for that is what?
so the primary reason would be related to the fact that this number does include the depreciation. Well, I guess the depreciation is actually going to be on the investment in capital assets. So it primarily includes the fact that you do have a lot of that long-term liability related to the settlement payable. And so that's reducing your current operations, except that it's not going to be paid out currently. It's going to be paid out over time. So that's a large majority of it.
And isn't another large majority of that the capital assets?
I'm sorry, do what?
Isn't the other part of that the capital
Yes.
expenditures related to water and sewer, that we don't own those?
Correct. And that is, so you do have a lot of expenditures going out the door right now that you've had those bonds for, but are not becoming necessarily the city's infrastructure as they're part of SAW's or TxDOT's infrastructure. So those dollars that you're required to contribute would also show up just as expenses rather than assets.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I had a question. I think your summary slide comes from the Table A1, which is on page 5, one of the page 5s in the packet that we received, because there's lots of renumbering.
Lots of pages.
And I'm just kind of curious, in your experience in dealing with other cities, if some of the numbers that you present in here are comparable. You made the statement that a significant portion, 75% of the city's revenues originate from property and sales tax. Is that normal? I noticed that from the pie chart, we have 37 from sales and 38 from property tax. But do other cities of this general size, in your experience, have that breakout?
Oh, yes, sir. I feel like that's pretty comparable. Would you agree? It varies up and down. And those two types of revenues in particular are by and far the largest revenues for every city that we deal with.
And I know we've tried over the years to try to balance those rather than relying predominantly on property taxes. Down on the same page, it talks about some of the major expenses, and it indicates 39% of the cost is directly related to emergency services. I'm presuming that includes fire, police, and dispatch all collectively?
Yes, sir.
And is
that's
that
correct.
typical as well, or is that,
I feel like that's also pretty comparable. Yeah.
okay.
Just making sure to get a second opinion there.
And that includes police, fire, EMS, and dispatch?
Yes, and EMS.
Right, okay, good. Thank you, that was my question on that page.
Well, one thing too, I know for years we've been trying to as Councilmember Blue stated, to balance as close as we can property and sales tax revenue. The state always has recommended what they consider, is the way I remember them putting it, a healthy city, is to have about 40% of your revenue come from property tax and 40% come from sales tax. And we've always been sometimes as high as 50 or 52% property tax and down in the 20s for sales tax. So actually what we see here is that balancing coming in, and I think it's just another sign that things are really working well for us as a city, because that basically 80%, coming from, I guess it was 30% of each of those, so for 60, and then the other 40 from the other fees. So we're actually, the balancing part of it is great.
Mm-hmm. And you'll see that in a little bit where some of those revenues have come up from previous years too in an upcoming, well, I was going to say an upcoming slide, an upcoming printed slide.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that particular piece? Well, certainly I wanted to spend a little bit of time too on the general fund, since it is your, obviously your major fund. It's your largest major fund. And the general fund, in particular, I've got a slide just on it. Now, in this presentation, it has removed all those long-term items. So all the long-term assets, all the long-term liabilities, and it's reflected much more on how you budget and how you actually operate internally throughout the year. So in your general fund, you had $3.2 million of total assets, and certainly, again, the majority of that is in your cash and cash equivalents. You had total liabilities and deferred inflows, and those deferred inflows relate to the fact that your property taxes are not actually considered revenues until they're collected. So total liabilities of 1.2, and the majority of that is actually just an interfund that the city owes to the capital projects fund, just for accounting through the bond proceeds that were received. The general fund just is generally going to pay out a lot of those items, and so there's just a due to back to the capital projects. So that large liability isn't actually to outside vendors. A good majority of it's internal within the city. So that leaves you a total fund balance of just under $2 million, and that does represent about 3.8 months worth of average operating expenditures, and it's all considered unassigned, which means that it's all for just general operations. Any questions on that?
Question.
Yes, sir?
Okay, I can remember in years past that we've had as much as 6 months of it. Is it at 3.8 because we haven't received our property taxes yet? No?
The main reason for the decline from the previous years was in those years when it was up higher. That was prior to the EMS and dispatch being reported as departments within the general fund. And ever since it's been departments within the general fund, it's been a little bit lower. Now, in 2017, it is a little bit lower because one of the things I wanted to bring up here in a minute was this is the first year where you actually had some fairly large dollars paid back within the 380 development agreements. And so the way the city had initially recorded those payments was simply a reduction of the sales tax revenue because that's the primary way that the revenues come in. But the fact that the city has signed those development agreements, really those payments back out to the developer should be shown as expenditures. So you're going to see a little bit of a fluctuation here in a minute when budgets are compared to actual, simply because we made that reclassification. No change on the net, but simply just where it was presented. But certainly because those are included in the average operating expenditures, then that's another reason for the decline from previous year, simply because it was a fairly large payout this year.
Okay, if I remember right, we would like to stay at 5 months, right? That's the goal, right?
The GFOA usually recommends about 4 to 6 months. But I think 3.8 is, you're right there pretty much. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the general fund there? Well, turning to
I do have a question on that. I thought the GFAO was between 3 and 5 months.
Oh, is it?
4 and 6. Has GASB made a recommendation on that? Okay.
Yeah, I'd always remembered 3 to 6, 4 to 6 is fine. But as Council Member Blue asked earlier on a couple of things, and I think we try and point it out every year also, as far as our reserve compared to other cities comparable to us in size and budget, 3.8, I would say is above average. Is that a safe statement to make?
Well, I mean, it definitely varies from city to city, but I think you're right there in what they recommend. And as you just pointed out, too, with the way your revenue sources are balanced and are pretty comparable within a percentage of the city's total revenue, I think you're right on track.
Okay, thank you.
So on the next slide, you'll see it's actually a graph, and it's comparing the budget to the actual for the revenues and expenditures. And this is sort of that perfect illustration of what I was just saying before. So the budgeted figures look like it looks like the actual numbers came in above budget for revenue and, of course, over budget for expenditures, but that really is mostly because of the change in the presentation on where those 380 development agreement payments were recorded. Take that out of the picture, and they were very, very comparable. Sorry, I keep thinking that they're up there, so keep looking. On the next slide, I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of a historical picture, too. Again, this is still just looking at the general fund since it's the city's largest major fund. And so you can see there, as I mentioned before, the increase in the revenues as well as the expenditures. But again, in 2017, the reason for the revenues going up for the most part was because of the sales tax as well as the ad valorem tax values. Certainly your property tax rate did not go up for the FY17 year, but those assessed values went up, and then the sales tax also helped the revenues go up. So the reason for the expenditures increase, of course, was because those revenues went up related to sales tax and property tax, then those development agreement payments were being paid out. Well, I guess they were actually being paid out simply because the developer provided the information that they needed to get those reimbursements. So any questions on any of that? It is kind of fun to watch that historical growth, though, over the years.
Yeah. I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Oh, please.
We looking at table A2 and the percentage change in various expended, categories or expenditures. Since you do audit quite a bit of, a few municipalities, can you talk about the percentage change? For example, with city administration, 24.8% increase. I know each city's going to manage, different ways, but there are some numbers here, percentage changes that are, I'm not too sure, they're, a little on the high side. Can you talk about those? I mean, 24,
Well, and
18.
I can explain what the large percentage increase was for, in that department in particular. That's where those 380 development
Okay.
payments were. But as far as comparing it to other cities, as you said, it's hard to compare simply just due to the different departments and the different management styles. So it'd be hard to say if we see fluctuations, but one thing can cause, a 100% increase.
Sure.
Doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad thing. It just may be just kind of what happened.
Like the comparison between 2016 and 17 on city council, $2 to $3. That's 50% jump, right?
Exactly.
I wanted to hone in on the ones related to development services. That's 132% jump. Does that take into consideration those capital improvements
I
that we're
believe,
talking
yes,
about?
sir. I think that may have been
And
where
that
some of the
infrastructure
general,
built?
yeah,
I mean, we don't own that. Obviously, SAWS does, but
correct.
we cannot capitalize it. Therefore, we have to
Expense.
expend it.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
What about, I guess, animal control, public works, and 39%? I mean, granted, we're growing, so we need increased, services. We have to spend that money. But does that, in totality, does that send any, signals off as to, hey, you're growing too fast, you're expanding too fast, you're expending, too fast? I guess it goes back to management style.
Yes, sir, it does. And to be honest with you, for the most part, what we're looking at is more of just how did those actual numbers come in with what was expected in the budget? And so then that's where, going back to, with the exception of that change in presentation, the expenditures were right at budget. And so, to us, that looks like that there is some well-designed and well-planned out growth.
Good. All right, thank you.
Any other questions there?
Well, and Rick, you can add to this anything that I'm off on, but development services specifically, we've hired some new employees, and we're doing more work in-house, which has saved us money that we've been expending in other areas to subcontractors. So the same thing goes for administration. We've lumped a lot of things over the past 2 to 3 years that were in other areas into the administrative side, just for ease of keeping track of it and making it a little more accurate on what we were doing. Am I close on that, Rick?
Yes, sir. I would add to this that looking at this from a government-wide perspective is a little misleading in the sense that, for example, it shows in development services 577,016 to 1.3 million in 17. The city did not spend 1.3 million on development services, meaning that when they consolidate different aspects of our government, they put, I'm not going to say they force them into certain line items, but they put them into certain line items. And so that is why you're seeing that must be related to capital. I'm assuming it has to be related to the capital expenditures. So you're talking about expenditures in Fund 03.
Correct.
That they're putting in under development services because it's the one that most closely matches with the title of that category. Does that make sense? So this is taking all the funds, lumping them all together, and titling them development services. But really, this is water and sewer line money that's being spent, pedestrian bridge that's being spent, all of those things that we took bonds out for.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Any other questions there?
Thanks, Rick. Anything else? Okay, Kim.
Well, just a couple other slides here. So, so in addition to seeing the actual bar graph, I wanted to show you what the change in fund balance was. Now, those previous bar graphs were showing just the actual revenues and expenditures over the last 3 years. What I purposely left out there, just because I wanted you to get a real feel of the revenues and expenditures just within themselves. But in addition to those items, there's something also called other financing sources and uses. And that also impacts what your actual change in fund balance would be. So this next slide, when you actually see the 3 years in dollars, then that actually takes into account any additional other financing sources and uses. For example, in the FY16 year, when y'all had an opportunity to sell some land for about $500,000, that certainly helped cover some additional revenues into the city and helped a change in fund balance be positive. So that's why when you're looking at this, you'll see that 93016 was a large 440,000 positive change in fund balance. A lot of that came from that sale of land of about 500,000, I believe. At the same token, that 93015, that looks scary, but the reason for that 2 million negative change in fund balance was that was the year where it was implemented to move the EMS and the dispatch into the general fund from those other funds. So that's sort of a misleading, and that's why I wanted to give that previous slide just between the revenues and expenditures themselves. Any questions on that?
And I would like to clarify the change in fund balance of the 105,000. The actual budget that was approved had a deficit of, and primarily related to the transfer of money from the general fund to the debt service fund. We originally budgeted, I think, 490 something thousand. So we're actually 305,000, excuse me.
Yes.
Better than what we anticipated in FY17.
That's correct. And that's why, to your earlier question, Mr. Villanueva, that's really where our focus comes into play, is what was the approved budget compared to the actual expenditures.
One last thing, I'm sorry. The sale of the land for 520,000, that went into the general fund?
Yes, sir. That was in the general fund.
Okay, so we had 520 to the good for that particular fiscal year that we don't have for 17.
Correct.
That's what that would indicate here. So we're kind of lucky we sold that asset to generate the cash.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
why the FY16 is so large.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Well, the last little bit of picture I wanted to give you was, so the last slide is, as you may recall, in recent years, we were required by a new accounting standard we've always reported what your net pension liability was, the unfunded portion of your future retirement. But now we're actually required to record it as a liability, and that was one of those larger liabilities I mentioned earlier. So you can see here now the valuation date looks like it's off, but it's because it follows the calendar year that the Texas Municipal Retirement System follows. So that's why you see 2016, 15, and 14. But you can see overall the city has a pretty healthy funding ratio. It's actually a very healthy funding, from 87.24% in 2016. The main reason why it looks like it dropped back from 2014 is simply because in 2014 they did an actuarial study that I think when they revised some of their assumptions the following year, I think they realized some things that they wanted to change. And so primarily the reason for the change had nothing to do with anything the city was contributing. It was simply due to some of those actuarial assumptions that changed. And suddenly they said, oh, just kidding, you weren't quite as funded as we originally thought. So, but overall, anything over 80% is a very nice ratio to be at. And so the city's still looking at a good, healthy ratio there. And that's pretty much everything on my presentation. Any questions for me? Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Debbie.
Hi. As part of our audit, I met with Mr. Villanueva in November, and we went over, he requested that we do some extra procedures, and we went over those. I want to say that, yes, we did do those extra procedures. We found no issues at the time. However, yesterday he did email me and ask me a couple questions. One had to do with the budget and I guess a perception of an email that I did send back to Rick. And I think I focused maybe on, was he demanding something from me? I perceived that he was requesting information from me. We, of course, think budget transparency is very important. However, we don't want your financial statements or your trial balance to become overly cumbersome. So we'd like to offer the suggestions that if you wanted to see specific data on specific line items, that they be either set aside and approved in the council meetings, or that you have some sort of spreadsheet that you prepare. You had specifically been interested in parks and recs, so you may want a spreadsheet that separates Carnival from movie night, band, etc. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, and if there are any questions, be happy to answer them.
I do have a question. What is the usual percentage? I know that some cities have a bigger park system, for example, than we do, like Bernie, for example. What is the percentage usually of a budget goes to Parks and Rec?
That's really hard. I live in Shirts, and their parks percentage is very high.
Where?
Shirts.
Shirts.
City of Shirts. Cibolo is less, Universal City is less, but yet they all surround each other. Next year, because Universal City has decided to do movies in the parks and a couple other things, their expense will go up. So, you know, it's hard to say because City of Shirts has a fund that's dedicated to that. They kind of have a big party at 4th of July, just like you all, Carnival is what I was thinking of, but.
When I say percentage, is it less than 1%
Oh,
of the
no,
budget?
no,
or is it higher
no,
than
it's
that?
higher.
Much
Yeah,
higher.
and their financial statements are online, so if you wanted to see the exact percentage, I didn't really come prepared for that question, but I could send you some information on what percentage of their budget is spent, but I think it just varies depending on what functions. You know, you have two major I don't want to say parties, but festivals, like Shirts does, they spend a good deal of money on Parks and Rec.
Okay, so I would like to see a percentage of some
Okay,
of these
I can-
cities. That would be great if you could.
I can do that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Any,
Well, I know I've gone to other cities' websites to compare our budget numbers to theirs in certain areas. And 2%, which is basically what we try and keep in Parks and Recreation of our budget, is very conservative compared to others that I've seen, especially when you consider that in that we have the labor and equipment to do the mowing and all the other things to maintain and take care of our few parks that we have. So and plus at all of our community events, all of the extra ones other than Marketplace, which comes about 14 different community events that we have. So it would be interesting to see. I haven't done that for a couple of years, but we can probably do that in-house. If you can do it or have it handy, that would be okay.
I can just pull a bunch of audits, but again, you know, when you classify Parks and Recs, you might include the mowing
Right.
and that, but other cities don't include that in their Parks and Recs budget. So sometimes it's a little hard to,
it
you
is
know,
hard.
exactly, but I can give
Apples to
you,
apples.
I can give you what those percentages of their budget are.
Anything else? Paul?
I don't think so.
You guys, anything? No. That's it?
That's it. That's all I've got.
So we did good?
Well, you always ask that, and yes, I think that, you know, it's funny, every city asks that. I was in Port Lavaca today, and they said, you know, give me a grade. It's so hard, but yes, you've passed.
Pass with a 70 or pass with a?
Yeah.
Good. Well, we appreciate you guys, and I know each year you say that our staff, our city treasurer, and our now our new city treasurer and Rick are always good to work with, so we appreciate that and appreciate your work. Thanks for coming. Okay, next up on item 7 is discussion and action on designating the Lotus City Park.
Mayor, y'all need to officially accept.
Oh, yeah, okay. That is action, so, yeah, we have to approve the budget. Thanks, Rick. I had overlooked that, so if we can have a motion and a second to approve the budget as presented tonight by Kim and Debbie. I'll take a motion.
It's the audit.
I mean, the audit.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to.
I'm okay. I really am.
I'd like to, for us to approve the budget.
It's contagious.
The audit for fiscal year ending 2017 as presented this evening by Armstrong, Vaughn and Associates for the city of Helotes and the city of Helotes Economic Development Corporation.
Okay, so we have a motion from Massey. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Fredericks. Any further discussion? No. Then we'll call the question. All in favor of approving the audit, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Our audit is approved. Thanks, gals. Okay, next up on item 7, we have discussion and action on designating the Lotus City Park, Helotes City Park Playground, Helotes Natural Area and Disc Golf Course as integral parts of the Helotes Creek Linear Park, and all of the parks will, with this action, be consolidated into the Helotes Creek Linear Park system. So if we can have a motion and a second to discuss and take action on this.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we discuss, take action on, what is it, 7?
We have a motion from Buys. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Massey. Okay, Bert, it's your motion.
Well, this sounds like a really good idea to me. Is this gonna, if we do this, is this gonna get us into that, that trail, the wildlife, what is it, the wildflower trail or something like that?
We're already part of that.
No, but it's just that part of the park there, isn't it?
This park.
Oh,
This park is designated HOTE 084, which is on
will
the,
this bring in the other ones into that too?
no.
It will not.
This is just trying to consolidate all of the parks into the linear park system, which will enable us to do some things with C of O money for all of the parks, including the linear park area.
Okay. Well, I think it's a great idea. That's all I have.
Cynthia?
Well, I'm a little confused because the linear park idea was to put a walkway along Helotes Creek. And so I don't know how these are going to be consolidated. I mean, was the idea so that someday they would all actually lead to that park and we could walk to the linear park? Did we ever get the linear park again, if that ever comes up again? Or is that linear park done and finished because now you just mentioned you want to use C of O money that was designated for that linear park to all these other parks? So I'm just, I've always been, you know, I was very disappointed when our linear park went down the drain. And so I'm just a little confused about how it could be called Helotes Creek Linear Park when it's not anywhere near the Helotes Creek.
Well, if you recall, in 2007, we received a donation of the acreage down in the creek bed, and we designated at that time that particular parcel as the Helotes Creek Linear Park. The grant project that we had just happened to have that name attached to it. The original plan was to connect the linear park in Helotes Creek with a trail or walk down Riggs Road over to here. And then when we acquired the disc golf course and then the fitness park, it was to try and tie all of those together with bicycle and pedestrian walkways. And so hopefully by consolidating them all under that one umbrella, it's going to enable us to not immediately, but to work toward making that connectability for bicyclists and pedestrians to go from each of those parks if they want to. Because we see people now walking from Park Estate, not Park Estates, Ranch Acres, Iron Horse, down to the disc golf course and fitness park. And we've had multiple requests through the years to put some kind of bicycle or walking path along Riggs Road connecting Old Town. So it's all part of that long-range plan. This was just a thought to consolidate it all together and enable us to do some things with the whole system rather than individual parks.
How much is left in the C of O for this particular designation?
We don't have an exact number, but it's a considerable amount. And it is allowing us to do improvements in Old Town and to the park system, to the waterworks infrastructure, the way we worded it. And this is just going to enable us to be able to do that a little easier. We can still do it. This was just an idea to bring all the parks into one system, still maintaining their individual identities of the Lotus City Park, the disc golf course, and the fitness park, and the linear park, but all designated the Lotus Linear Park system.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, not right now, no.
Ed?
I'm okay with it. I see what you're saying, Mayor, about a long-range, plan to designate or give it a name. In the meantime, it needs to maintain its individual title or statement, if you will, so it's not to confuse people and direct them in the right direction when they're looking for specific things like the disc golf course. I'm for that.
Alex?
Well, maybe I was a little confused as well, because I'm looking at item 7, and then also it's item 8, and they seem to have a lot of same words, and I'm wondering why it's two different things there. I'm fine with the changes that are being proposed. I just was wondering why they were both two different items like that, and what the difference really.
Well, the second item, and we'll get to that, is simply a name change down there. We've been calling it the natural area and disc golf course. It's really not a natural area anymore. And now that we have a full-fledged fitness park and we have fitness classes and a lot of people using it and using the fitness equipment, it just seemed more appropriate to call it the fitness park and disc golf course rather than natural.
Maybe my confusion comes from item 7 actually refers to it by its new name that hasn't yet been approved.
Yeah, we missed that on the agenda, but if you look at the agenda request, we made that change.
That's
to where
why
it
they
doesn't
seem
do
to be
that
so
anymore.
overlapping. The 7 says you're gonna consolidate the Lotus Fitness Park and disc
That
golf
was the
course,
original way.
which hasn't been approved yet until you get to item number 8.
Ignore what the agenda says and look at
Okay.
the caption on the agenda item itself, and that's
Then
correct.
I'm good, thank you, sir.
Okay. Paul?
So we're really not proposing expending any monies at this time to do any major improvements
No.
to this system? Okay, but we could potentially use C of O money to do
Correct.
this if we wanted to.
Correct. And we are doing that in some things, like the new water meter at the disc golf course, because the C of Os allow us to expand the waterworks infrastructure. So we're looking at that's falling under that.
Would it be I mean, would you be able to, at some point in time, put bathrooms in parking? I mean, that's gonna become a problem.
We're
That's what
working
the
on
water is.
bathrooms now. That was part of the budget, and we're working on a
And you
design for that
potentially
now.
use C of O money for
Yes.
that? Okay. I'm for it. I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Okay, Cynthia, any follow-up?
I have a question about approval of different things once you get ideas on things. Will you be bringing it to the city council for paths? And I mean, things happen over there, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. I see it, and it's not that I'm not against it. It's just that sometimes it's a little weird to see things going on and not know about it until you're driving. And people are always asking me questions about oh, look, and I don't know about I don't believe in micromanaging, and you're the CEO and you can. But I was just wondering if when these bike paths start coming along line and
Yeah,
we want
those
to
kinds
put
of things,
expenditures,
definitely.
we will definitely be
And I'm
notified.
not saying that every single thing we do, if it fits within the budget of Parks and Recreation, without putting us into jeopardy of going over, we'll probably do those kinds of things. The reason we did the path the way we did is we were able to get major donations from the suppliers. All of the base was donated from Martin Marietta. We got a discounted price on the asphalt, and we did everything in-house. So we came in substantially less than the bids that we had, so we just went ahead and did it because it was well within our budget. But anything connecting the parks and doing that kinds of things, yes, we definitely bring all that to council.
I do have a question. The audit people already left, but I was reading through the audit, believe it or not, I actually did. And one of the things that they mentioned was to change the minimum requirement for city budget from 300 or to 5,000 or something like that, right?
We already did that.
The purchasing,
The purchase
3,000, yeah.
to 3,000, which to me makes a lot of sense because that other amount was so low. Did you all change that, or has that been
I
implemented?
already asked it.
yeah.
We did that, didn't we?
Y'all,
do that?
y'all changed the,
And we changed it to 5,000?
no, to 3,000.
3,000, from 500 to 3,000.
Okay. So after 3,000, it goes to what? Where it comes to council? No.
No, those are just how you legally can purchase something. So anything below 3,000 is exempt from bidding.
Oh,
Anything between 3,000 and 50 requires you contact historically underutilized businesses, and anything over 50,000 has to go through a competitive sealed bid process.
okay, so when we.
Everything over 50,000 for sure has gone before council.
So basically, it's during the budget time when we can go to
Yes.
the more specific things. I got it.
And we usually try and point all that out during the budget.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's it.
And Rick brought up historically utilized businesses. We've said many times in the past, probably the reason they are is many of them that we asked to bid our projects, we'd ever hear from them. So all we're required to do is reach out to a specific number of hubs. If we can't get any to bid, then we can take whatever other bids we get that are not historically underutilized businesses, but we always reach out to those. And there's a database that the state has, and Susan goes through that during the purchasing process.
Okay.
Okay, so Bert, you have any follow-up on this particular
Well,
item?
we're speaking about the restroom, we already budgeted for the restroom, 25,000, so.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting the water, because the sewer's there. So,
Right.
Yeah, and that park's really used a lot.
Anything else?
No, sir.
On this? Ed, anything else?
No, sir.
Alex? Paul?
No, sir.
Okay, so by this action, a yes vote is just merely to designate all of our parks under that Lotus Creek linear park system. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. That takes us to 8. And again, this is just, as it's explained here, is just to make the name out front, and I have a picture of the sign. It says now Natural Area and Disc Golf Course, and since the fitness park is now such a critical part of it, it just made sense to me to rename it Lotus Fitness Park and Disc Golf Course, and that's basically the purpose of this item. So I'll take a motion in a second to discuss and take action on changing the name from Natural Area to Fitness Park and Disc Golf Course.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we discuss and take action on item number 8.
We have a motion from Fredericks. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Villanueva. Paul, it's your motion.
No, I'm all in favor of it. Like I said, the many times that I've driven by there, there's always a lot of people out there walking and doing exercise classes, and my wife has gone and used it several times in the morning, so nice addition to the park system. Thank you.
You bet. And I've had people who've let me know they live down Antonio Road, and they're walking down there just to use that new walking trail. So it's really, people really like it. And the guys from Public Works were telling us that even as we put the sealer on the base before we put the asphalt down, people were walking on that. And as they did the last section, people were walking on the hot asphalt while they were rolling. That's how they were excited about that trail. So it's really been cool. Ed, any discussion?
Sounds good. I like the idea and the improvements, and I'm sure the citizens appreciate it. Thank you for doing that.
Alex?
I have nothing further.
Bert?
Yeah, I've got something.
Okay.
Spend the money for another piece of wood,
we
instead of
probably-
turning it
We probably
backwards.
will. I was just trying to
That
to
just,
be-
to me, will look cheesy. And
Well,
then-
we would hide it.
You
the
would, how would you
backside.
hide it?
We'll figure something out.
Okay, and then I
We're
just.
just trying to be
I
frugal.
just would like to throw this out there. Is there, would, I don't know if it'd have to come to us or not, but can we put an additional sign on 1560?
A what?
An additional sign saying the same thing on
Like
1560?
an LED flashing,
No, we can't do that. That's,
know.
Yeah.
Sure,
No, I
we-
mean,
With a-
is this the time to bring it up? I mean, to,
Whatever you want to bring up, and then we'll consider it.
because, I mean, unless you drive down Paragon, you don't know what, I mean, you don't know what that park is. I think an additional sign is needed on 1560.
On 1560?
Yes, sir.
We thought about it early on and then shelved it, but yeah, we'll look at that.
I don't think it's necessary. All you gotta do is
People
drive
see
down
it.
there and you can see people
People
jumping
see the
around and
bridges,
running
yeah.
and going
Okay.
around. It's
Just-
obvious it's a park.
That's not part of this motion, so.
Well, that, I was just throwing it out there. Just- I would like to see it.
Billboard. An Instagram mural. Okay, any other discussion?
Sorry I brought it up.
Then with no further discussion being requested, we'll call the question. All in favor of approving number 8, the name of the park, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. And on to number 9. This is not an action item, but a discussion and direction of an ordinance amending Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98 zoning, and amending Section 98.69 overlay districts, permitted and non-permitted uses. So do we have a presentation of any kind on this, Rick? Okay, well, the staff is looking for direction. So hopefully you guys have looked at this and will be willing to offer direction. I think the first thing would be on the Spires Towers thing. My personal opinion, 15 feet is too short for a lot of these subdivisions and other things that are going in along major thoroughfares, and 20 to 24 feet would be more appropriate, especially if there's they're putting it on an area that's lower than the highway or roadway. But that's just my opinion. But those are the kinds of things staff is looking for on both that and the B3 overlay. Ed, want to start off? Got any comments on this?
Well, I agree with you on that. I think 15 feet above average grade, but then you have certain circumstances, as we've seen before, where the grade is a lot lower, and therefore it's more useful to have a 20-foot, for example, height requirement or
Because
minimum
15 feet's not very tall.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I'm with you on that. I'd like to see some kind of qualifying statement to say if it's, if it's at a lower grade, then, we go to a 20-foot or 25-foot, whatever we agree upon. The rest of the permitted, unpermitted schedule of uses and the change of one of those permitted uses to unpermitted, I'm in favor of those, just the same. And it looks like we're going to be taking this up at a future meeting anyway, so.
Right.
Yeah, okay. That's all I got.
Alex, any direction for staff on either one of these items? Or-
Yes, sir, on both, actually. First of all, I don't necessarily think that 15 feet is a bad height requirement. If you take a look at the room we're in, 15 feet puts it probably about the top of the white wall, I'm guessing, maybe around there. Remembering that this is not a sign, it's not a wall, this is something in addition to whatever else they have, if they choose to have some sort of monument. However, I would understand that there are times when the terrain, especially when you're out against a major road like 1560 or Highway 16, could diminish the size of such a structure. So I would entertain the possibility of allowing planning and zoning to have some latitude under special circumstances like terrain to go maybe up to 25% above that. I know our sign ordinance, and this is not part of the sign ordinance, but our sign ordinance allows them some latitude for some larger size, but it requires that latitude to be granted by them as opposed to just be granted by right. And so I would suggest, and obviously consensus is where this is going, that we go with the 15 with maybe a 25% latitude at the planning and zoning level, rather than have to come for a variance to council. Just give them that latitude to deal with whatever local circumstances might be there. The other question I had, that's with regard to the height, but since we're talking about it, I didn't see anything with regard to the number or the placement. And I wanted to say that we think about where these are gonna end up, and I don't think any business is gonna wanna have 17 of them, but we don't have any restrictions either. And they could very well put one on every corner and start making really very large things. I don't have a suggestion for a number, I just think that maybe we ought to consider, is the number appropriate or not? And also the potential size. You know, we're thinking about a spire. Well, what we don't know is this thing 20 feet wide and 15 feet tall? Are they making some monster of a monument? And then the final thing was, are we limiting this to strictly the structure itself, or what if they choose to ornament it, such as putting a car on top? Is that part of the 15 or 15 plus 25% limit, or is it's just strictly the structure, and are they allowed to put anything on top of it to include possibly a flagpole or something else? Obviously, if you put wording or advertising on it, I chased them away, didn't I? Wording or advertising, then it becomes a sign and is regulated
I think it was
differently.
when you started.
Yeah, I know. They thought it was gonna be a while. They're astute. But, no, these are things that I was thinking about, because a lot of times we come back here and like, well, our ordinance is silent on the issue. And I know we don't wanna make the ordinance too long, but I think we need to at least have an understanding of staff's perspective on, is it strictly the monument? Can they put something on top? If so, what? Obviously, they can't put wording on it or advertising on it, but in what other method are we going to permit decorations? And I don't mean lights and
At one point, we talked about
Yeah.
the width and the shape and all of that, and put it down somewhere. What was that?
It's not here, and that's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
The council never addressed spires or ornamental towers or
No,
anything.
we haven't.
Well, we talked about ideas, though, I think, during one of our discussions, but we'll have to research that.
I can tell you that we did research that in no city, to my knowledge, that we could find regulates those types of things. They regulate the height and the height alone. With regard to if you put a car on top of it, that would still be a part of the structure.
Okay. That's
So
what I
that
wanted to
would be,
clarify.
that would be limited in height, including if you put a flagpole there, it's still attached to that structure.
Well, again, that's easy to say, but it's like all the other things. One person's interpretation, whether it's us or our staff member, and the applicant, they may see it differently and argue the point. And then if there's not some clarity in there, then we come into the same problem that we do on most other things.
We do have a lot of creative applicants.
Yeah, we do.
And a lot of times they come back and ask for forgiveness after the structure's already built.
Correct.
And it's usually those ambiguities that cause that problem.
Yes.
So those were some of the things with regard to the spire part of it. I thought planning and zoning did a really good job of addressing the questions of the overlay zone, the overlay district and zoning. I had a couple questions that I had on the areas that were being moved from unpermitted to permitted with city council approval. And the questions that I have, and I guess more is for discussion since we're talking about direction. Recently, I had a conversation with a gentleman who lives actually in Cedar Springs, and he lives immediately adjacent to the self-service car wash there. And his concern wasn't so much the car wash as the vacuums that run constantly at night whenever anybody's there. And so the thought there, and I was actually on planning and zoning when this was, well, actually this came out a long, long time ago when the overlay district came through. And I know the then group of individuals and citizens didn't like the fact that we already had 2 self-service car washes in the area. They just didn't want any more. There really wasn't more thought as to why. They just thought 2 was enough and they didn't want more. But the question I would have is that the noise associated with those, and I know it's city council approval is the recommendation, but it's still depending on how close you put it to someone's residence. You can put an 8-foot fence up, but you're not gonna stop the sound of that sort of equipment. And this was put in place because it is immediately adjacent to residential homes. The next item down below would be the tavern and outdoor area. I'm all in favor of that, but as I mentioned in a previous council meeting, the question to me is not whether they have outdoor seating, but the music associated with it. Again, the sound of an outdoor activity that has all that immediately adjacent to a residential neighborhood. I get we have Corneyville, I get we have Floors. Neither of them are, well, Corneyville is, but they've been there a long time, and so is that. We're talking about new establishments right there. So I would think we would have to figure out a way to address that issue. The same exact situation when it comes to veterinary office and hospital. I have no problem with it. I know that we have the Palms that are right there, but their boarding is indoor. They walk the dogs outside, and I can tell you that at night when they're out there doing that, I can hear the dogs barking. But if they had outdoor boarding, to me that means all night, all day, and I think that part of it is to me the concern. Again, it's the sound. You're right next to somebody's backyard where they're hoping to be able to enjoy sitting out on their patio and doing something. So those three issues, I don't mind having them if we can deal with the sound part. The final thing I would say, is that we gave them direction in December to also address the potential for a noise ordinance, and I don't think that's come up to planning and zoning at all. These three issues would fall in that same area. How do you control the noise or sound? Many of our neighborhoods don't have commercial areas right next to them, but that doesn't mean that 1560 and parts of Bend Air Road aren't going to become commercial pretty quick, and you're going to have noise issues, so I think we need to get ahead of that one too. Those were my comments. Thank you.
So veterinarian office and hospital, and just omit the, with outside
To me, that's a
boarding?
Yeah.
Because a lot of veterinarians do board and they have indoor.
But I think there is somewhere in the document later on, it talks about, well, I don't know that it's all in here now, but I thought that the veterinary with indoor boarding was something that was permitted. Is that in the schedule already, or is it?
That's in B3 overlay. That's in B3, so it would be allowed by right.
Okay, so the B3 allows outdoor, but this would be moving the outdoor boarding into that, and I think that outdoor boarding part's the part that worries me. If you take the outdoor boarding, well, then you're right back to where we started from, right?
That it?
That's it.
Bert?
Okay. Alex brought up a lot of the same things I was talking about. Whenever it comes to city council, we would have to, like, let's say a tavern with outdoor seating. When it comes to city council, can we put like a regulation of what time it would have to shut down their outside service? We can do that.
It's a part of the zoning process, yes.
Okay. And then,
Excuse me, if you remember to do it.
well,
I'm just saying.
you're here, Alex.
5 years from now, man?
No, I'm just kidding. No, but I just wanted to make sure that we would have that ability.
Yeah, it's a special use permit, so you can put any conditions you want on the operation of that use.
Okay. And then my next thing is Chairman Michelle brought up some good things, I think. Did you guys get a chance to go over that? He brought up some things for the overlay district that he believes should be put on the prohibited list, and one is firearm sales and service. I agree with him. I agree with him there because they could put in an indoor shooting range. And then I think the tool rental, sales and services would also be a prohibited deal. And he brings up a good point. The broadness of the term tool could allow for loud machinery and things like that. It's just something that could be considered. I thought those were two good thoughts that he had. And then I don't know what he means that in the last paragraph. He says that it put in the B3 overlay district, maybe get it under city council approval would be a golf driving range. I don't know how you could put one in over there, but if they could, I wouldn't see a problem with that. And I'm not real sure what he means by the off-street parking. I mean, you have to have parking over there, but does anybody know what he meant by that?
Off-street parking is a use within our schedule of uses. So
Okay.
it would be like a parking lot or a parking garage or something along those lines.
So it's already permitted.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know what he meant by that. But I think we should consider a couple of his suggestions here, the ones that I brought up.
I think he's saying that it's permitted by right, and he would prefer it, or he suggests that it be permitted through city council approval.
No? It's probably a good idea also. Okay, that's all I had.
Well, in the firearms sales and service, there are a lot of places that sell firearms that don't have indoor shooting ranges, so all you'd have to do is say, without indoor shooting ranges, and
Yeah, I guess-
still
Could
allows.
and we can do that also?
Sure.
Yes, okay.
And as far as the tools, you could say hand tools only. There are a lot of places that don't sell hand
Well,
tools.
he was
generators, that
talking
kind of
about the
stuff.
broadness of the term tool. So we just have to.
So you just tighten up on the
tighten it up.
word tool.
Okay.
Paul?
Really, everything is, that I had has really already been discussed. The size of the base of the spires is really one of the main concerns. Alex kind of addressed that already. Everything I had really has been discussed. Thank you.
Okay. Cynthia?
Okay, on the spires and stuff, we need to think about any future churches that might come here. The churches have very large, tall spires, and it would not look good to have just a 15-foot little, might as well not have one.
That's actually exempted by code.
It is exempted already, okay. And as far as, I think 15 feet is for a spire, I don't think it's tall enough either. I think 20 feet is probably a better thing. And the other thing is, you're talking about now we're micromanaging, okay, how thick is it gonna be? The thing is, when it's a spire or a tower, it's usually goes up. There's only, from a architectural viewpoint, it can't be too big or, on the bottom if it's only gonna be 20 feet tall. It just can't. And then it's gonna go through planning and zoning anyway. They're gonna look at the design and they're gonna, if it is this gigantic looking thing, they're gonna say, no. But, so I think 15 feet isn't tall enough for a spire or a tower or something that's a nice design in front of maybe a subdivision or whatever. So I would go for 20 feet. And as far as the other uses, I do agree that we don't want outside boarding in the overlay district. There's nothing worse than dogs barking at night. They will wake you up and you will never go back to sleep again. And I'm not really sure that we need a tavern with an outdoor area in this overlay district. Why? We can have a tavern, but why does it have to have an outside area in front of a residential? I just don't think that's necessary. I don't see anything wrong with having a tavern there. I just don't think we should have an outside area. And I do agree with Greg Michelle's comments as well. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay, thanks. Ed, any follow-up?
No, sir.
Alex?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Of course.
No, I'm fine.
Don't let her.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
It won't, but, she'll get her turn.
I know.
Firearms, Walmart sells them. So I don't have a problem with that in the overlay district. I guess maybe the shooting range, but if it's indoors, trust me, they don't want those to go outside anyway. So that's why I don't have a problem with it. But, and you raised a question about the driving range. I think the concern on the driving range is the lighting, because there's no guarantee that it's not daytime only driving range. It's gonna be the lighting issues. And if I'm not mistaken, sporting facilities are excluded from our light ordinance, which was our problem when the little driving range was where now the development is going in next to Los Reyes Canyon. They could do all the lights they want to, and they are completely exempt. So if you put in a sporting facility in our city, you are exempt from the lighting, and you can have all the bright lights you want. Probably not something you want in someone's backyard. So I agree with that one. And I think to address Councilmember Massey's concern about the tavern, I think the problem, and I think Rick might address this some as well, is the definition of a tavern. A tavern, of course, based on state law, is anything that has more than 50% of its revenue from alcohol. And so any place that might do that, even like a Chili's, if they wanted to have outdoor seating, and they have 51% of their revenue from alcohol, whether it's at the table or at the bar, they're designated a tavern, and they no longer can have an outdoor seating area, even a place like a Chili's or an Applebee's or something like that. And I think that's why the concern came in about the allowing a tavern. It's not because they allow a bar to have outdoor seating, but a lot of your restaurants that serve alcohol are designated taverns simply because of the percentage of alcohol sales. And finally, on the spires, I'm fine with a spire, but there's nothing that designates whether or not this could be a 40-foot-long monument to something, and you make, you know, a wall that is not part of a fence and not part of a sign would have nowhere else to fall but this regulation, unless we want to call towers and spires and then have another category for other things. I'm not saying that I have a problem with, you know, I mean, I get it. An obelisk or a tower or a spire is going to be fine, but we don't know that it's not going to be 30 feet wide. And the number, for example, you could have somebody who comes in and wants to put, you know, this is going to sound wrong, but a series of 9 elephants, 20 feet tall, in a row. They're right there.
It's not a spire, it's not a tower. Oh my
And
God,
then it's not
similar.
regulated.
That's a lot of.
That's my point. So maybe Rick could tell us what staff would do if someone came in and wanted to put a series of elephants at the beginning of it. Or,
Yeah,
I mean,
Rick-
we have someone with huge horses, right? So maybe they pick a different mascot. How would that be regulated? Because to me, I'm thinking that this is gonna become more of a catch-all to all structures other than fences and signs. Am I right? Was that the way this was intended?
No, this is strictly for towers and spires.
Okay.
And similar type elements, like we had the issue with Bryce
With
with.
the
Right.
price, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this would not be.
Well, then,
And we could prohibit giant elephants or horses.
Now, those are typically gonna be on commercial projects, and commercial projects are always reviewed by at least the Planning and Zoning Commission and sometimes council. So, I guess you have to have a little faith in the people that y'all appoint.
okay. I just want to make sure that we're not omitting something in the process, and because we've had a lot of those conversations. Well, I guess it's there because, and I don't have a problem with the towers and spires. I just want to make sure that we're not omitting something and then end up having to accept something because our ordinance is silent on the issue.
So like somebody's gonna come and say, well, you know what? Lotus Country Club has the big old bear, you know?
And a longhorn?
They have the longhorn. How come they can do that and we can't? Well, because they did it without asking, number one, but,
Their grandfather.
they're grandfathered in, I guess, you know, but we don't have those type of, I guess, statues. I don't even know what you call
Well, Old Town actually does allow structures like they put in front of,
it in front of.
Lotus Country Club.
Okay. So,
Old Town is special. Okay, you finished?
No.
No, okay. I'm done. You're done. Okay, Bert, you're up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot to bring up spires the first time. I got sidetracked. Okay, does anybody remember how tall Bryce Wood's tower is?
22
It
feet.
was about 24 feet, as I recall.
Okay. I mean, I don't have any heartburn over that tower over there.
It
Being
doesn't look, it doesn't look big.
It doesn't look big. I mean, I have no heartburn over that. And to me, see, we're in a rock and a hard place here because we have so many different areas of our city now that we're regulating. I mean, over there on Galm Road, there's a different feel to it. And they're different subdivisions. And to me, a big, nice entrance doesn't look bad at all. I mean, that Brycewood, I have no heartburn over that at all. So I don't know how we can regulate, it's tough to regulate one part of the city, not like the other part of the city, even though it's the ETJ. Not Brycewood, but the rest of it, because they're coming. And I just don't see us, I don't really think we should be, making them have really small entranceways, because that's kind of cool to have something like that out front, in my mind. So how do we do that? Use that part of town one way and other parts of town another way. It's hard to do.
Guess it goes back to case-by-case basis.
Yeah,
Yeah. You almost have to do a case-by-case basis, I agree.
is that it?
You want me to stop? Okay,
No,
I'll stop.
no, that's okay.
No, that's all I've
just
got.
curious.
That's all I've got.
Is it? Okay. Paul? Cynthia, anything else? Keep in mind, this is to give staff direction on things that we can put together and refine this and bring it back to you.
I
So
just,
the public hearing.
I I just think it
And
would be.
there's gonna be a public hearing
Oh,
on
yeah.
this too.
Okay, well, I think 20 feet, I'm still got the 20, at least at 20 feet. I think 15 is not big enough, tall enough.
Okay, we can make that adjustment
And
and that
let's,
can be
let's
discussed.
put a definition for towers and spires and similar structure elements so that we can maybe appease,
Well, I have definitions in here.
I mean, there's a definition for those things. They're not big block things.
Just suggestion, what if we create a legend, just come up with some designs, have an architect draw them up. And here's side, for, this type and this type and, and we have something to go by.
Well, in the sign ordinance, I included in the back under the definitions, all of the pictures of all the different
With
types
some
of
pictures,
signs.
yeah.
I can add pictures in here.
I think that's,
Is that gonna be in the ordinance too? Are you gonna keep that in the ordinance, or is that just for FYI for us?
No,
That would be-
those get codified in the ordinance.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, any follow-up? Alex?
No, sir.
Oh, my God. Bert? Anything else?
No.
Okay, you're good? Okay, well, gee, we thank you. That was
Mayor,
interesting.
I do have one additional, we do need direction as to whether we're going to have our public hearing on May 10th. Because we have to publish by April 24th, if that's the case.
Does the public hearing have to be set by council? Or it's determined by when we bring this back to council? So if we bring it back, say, the second meeting, the first meeting in May, then we would have a little more time to decide on the public hearing, right?
All you're required is to have one public hearing. That doesn't
Public
mean,
hearing.
that doesn't,
Council is not setting the public hearing date.
we do it, the code actually stipulates that council should set a public hearing date for
Date?
for more administrative things. We typically set that public hearing in-house. So it can go either way.
Okay,
Does P and Z have to have a public hearing as well?
They've already had a public hearing.
so when would you be able to have this back and ready to go for a public hearing? By next meeting?
No, we can't have it. What I'm saying is, if the earliest public hearing date that council can have is May 10th.
May 10th?
Yes.
Okay. So is that part of this item?
The direction, yes.
Yeah. The direction or actually set the date? I don't remember what it says.
The direction to publish in the newspaper by
Declaring a
April.
public purpose.
look under suggested motion.
Okay, so we need to have a motion on setting a public hearing? Is that what you're saying?
No, I
Direction.
just need a general consensus that council
General
wants.
consensus, okay.
Do we
May
have
10th.
to have a public hearing?
Yes.
Yes, because
Okay.
it's a zoning.
So then why don't we have one?
Let's
We
have one on
are,
May
it's just
10th.
determining when.
I think you're right.
We wanna talk about it more.
Okay.
Right, is that what
So-
we're gonna discuss it more before we have a public hearing? Is
That was my question. Are you gonna be able to get everything,
You don't have to take action on an item just because you have a public hearing that date.
right?
You can postpone to the next meeting, and then you don't need additional public hearings after that
So
point.
May 10th is our first meeting in May?
Yes,
Okay, and that would be the earliest date for a public hearing?
yes.
Okay. Anybody have a problem with having a public hearing on May 10th?
No.
There's your consensus. Okay, anything else? Okay. Then with nothing else and our agenda being complete, if there are no objections, we will adjourn. Any objections? Hearing no objections, we're adjourned at 8:38.